The city of Oriones stood as a small jewel in the middle of endless wilderness. Tall, shining walls protected the humanoids from the dangers beyond. Inside, people moved quickly through streets full of light and sound. Children laughed as they ran past tall buildings. Traders called out their prices. The city seemed safe, but everyone knew that beyond the walls, the wildlands were alive with creatures and storms that could destroy everything. Among the city dwellers, a young humanoid named Darren often felt trapped. He was not like other children who were content to play or study inside the walls. Darren wanted to explore the forests, the mountains, and the rivers that stretched far beyond the city. He wanted to discover the secrets left by the ancestors, the beings who had once lived on Oriones long before humanoids. Darren would spend hours on the wall, staring at the forests. He watched the trees sway even in calm winds. Strange glowing flowers appeared at night, lighting paths that seemed to move. He had heard stories from the elders about the ancestors. They were said to be wise and powerful, and they left behind strange carvings called the tears of the ancestors. These tears were rumored to hold knowledge and power that could change the world. Not everyone believed in the stories. Darren's mother, Lena, often warned him. "The wild is not for you," she said. "It is dangerous. You should stay inside where it is safe." Darren listened, but he could not ignore the pull he felt toward the forest. Something in him told him that the ancestors were calling. One morning, the city shook. The ground trembled beneath Darren's feet, and dust rose from the streets. People screamed as small rocks fell from the buildings. Darren ran to the wall and looked at the forest. Strange lights moved between the trees. They were not the normal glow of flowers. They were bright, moving in patterns that seemed to form shapes. The elders whispered nervously. Some said it was a sign of danger. Others thought it might be the ancestors trying to speak again. Darren's heart raced. He wanted to go and see, but he knew the city leaders would forbid it. He ran to find his friend Myra, a girl who loved adventure as much as he did. "Myra," he said, "something is happening in the forest. We have to see it." Myra looked worried. "Darren, what if it is dangerous? The elders say the wild is not for us." "I know," Darren said, "but I cannot stay here while something important is calling. I feel it. The ancestors left us something, and it is time to find it." After hours of planning in secret, Darren and Myra waited until nightfall. The city was quiet. Most people slept or stayed inside, afraid of the strange lights in the distance. They climbed down from the wall using ropes Darren had prepared. Their hearts pounded as they stepped onto the soft grass of the wildlands for the first time. The forest was alive. Strange sounds filled the air. Some were birds, but others were low growls or whispers of movement. Glowing plants lit the path. Their colors shifted from blue to green to red, creating a dreamlike scene. Darren felt excitement and fear at the same time. Myra held his hand tightly, her eyes wide. They walked deeper into the wildlands, careful to avoid large shadows that moved between the trees. Soon, they reached an ancient stone structure, half hidden by vines. Carvings covered the walls. Darren ran his fingers over the shapes. They were tears, carved deep into the stone, glowing faintly. "The tears of the ancestors," he whispered. "I knew they were real." Myra shivered. "What do they mean? Why are they glowing?" "I don't know yet," Darren said, "but I think they are trying to tell us something. We need to find more." Suddenly, a loud roar echoed through the forest. A massive shadow moved toward them. The ground shook under its weight. Darren and Myra froze, but then Darren grabbed Myra's hand and ran. The shadow moved fast, but the glowing plants lit their path. Their hearts pounded, but neither stopped. When they finally reached a small hill, they turned and saw the shadow disappear into the trees. They were safe, but both were breathing hard. Myra looked at Darren. We cannot tell anyone yet. They will not understand. We have to learn more on our own. Darren nodded. His eyes shone with determination. The ancestors left us something for a reason. I will find it, even if the whole city doubts me. We must be ready for what is coming. The two friends sat on the hill, looking at the glowing forest. They did not know what awaited them, but one thing was clear. Their world was about to change forever. The wildlands were not just a place of danger. They were a key to the past and perhaps the future of all humanoids. Darren and Myra woke at first light, still sitting on the small hill overlooking the forest. The glow from the plants in the night had faded, leaving only the soft green of the trees. The memory of the massive shadow haunted them. Neither spoke at first, but both felt the pull of the forest. Something was calling them deeper, something they could not yet understand. We cannot turn back now, Darren said quietly. The ancestors left these carvings for a reason. We have to see where they lead. Myra nodded, though her heart was full of worry. I am scared, Darren. That shadow, it was not normal. It was huge, and it felt intelligent. What if it is still following us? Darren took a deep breath. Then we must be careful. But we cannot run forever. We need to know what is out here. The two friends moved down the hill and entered the forest. The trees were taller than any in the city. Their trunks were thick, covered in bark that shimmered with faint colors. The air was alive with sounds. Birds sang songs that seemed to echo, and strange insects buzzed in patterns that made Myra shiver. Everywhere they looked, the forest seemed to watch them, as if it were aware of their presence. Hours passed, and the carvings on stones began to appear again. They were smaller now, etched into rocks near streams and between roots. The tears of the ancestors glowed faintly when they approached. Darren traced the shapes with his fingers. Some tears were shaped like drops, others like spirals. Myra noticed small symbols beside them. These look like instructions, she said. Maybe the ancestors left a path for us to follow. Darren studied the symbols. Yes. I think they are trying to tell us something about the wild. Maybe how to survive, or maybe how to protect ourselves. As they continued, the forest grew darker. Clouds blocked the sun, and a cold wind swept through the trees. The two friends felt tension in the air. Suddenly, a loud roar broke the quiet. It was closer than before, and this time, it was joined by smaller growls. A pack of predators emerged from the shadows, their eyes glowing in the dim light. Myra grabbed Darren's arm. Run, she yelled. They sprinted through the forest, weaving between trees and leaping over roots. The predators moved with surprising speed, but the carvings seemed to guide Darren. He recognized patterns in the light of the tears that led them through safer paths. After several tense minutes, they reached a small clearing near a stream. The predators stopped at the edge of the clearing, growling, but did not follow. Myra sank to the ground, exhausted. I do not know how we survived, she said. Darren looked at the carvings on a stone by the stream. The ancestors helped us. They left a trail to guide those who are brave enough to follow. We must trust it. The clearing held more secrets. Stones around the stream were arranged like a circle, and each one had a carving of a tear. The glow was brighter here, illuminating patterns on the ground. Darren and Myra realized that these were not just symbols, they were messages. They told stories of the ancestors, of battles fought against giant beasts, and of a time when humanoids lived freely in the wild. Myra touched one of the stones. Do you think we could learn their power? She asked. Darren nodded. I do not know yet. But I think this is the first step. The ancestors wanted us to remember, to learn from their mistakes. As they studied the circle, the wind rose again, and the forest seemed to sigh. A whisper floated through the trees, faint but clear. The tears will guide you. Protect the balance. Myra shivered. Did you hear that? Darren's eyes widened. Yes. The ancestors, they are speaking to us. For the first time, the danger of the wild felt different. It was no longer just a threat. It was a test, a challenge. The creatures, the storms, the strange lights, all of it was part of something greater. The tears of the ancestors were not just warnings, they were instructions, waiting for the right people to follow them. Darren and Myra stayed in the clearing until the sun began to set. They marked the spot in their memory and collected small stones with carvings to study later. Their journey was only beginning, but they understood one important thing: the wild was not mindless, and the ancestors had left a path for those who were brave and clever enough to follow. As night fell, they set up a small camp in the clearing. The shadows of the forest moved quietly around them, but Darren and Myra felt ready. Tomorrow, they would continue deeper into the wildlands. They did not know what lay ahead, but one thing was certain: the secrets of the ancestors were waiting, and the world of Oriones would never be the same. Back in the city of Oriones, life seemed normal at first. Children played in the streets, traders called out their prices, and the energy walls shimmered under the sunlight. But there was tension in the air. Soldiers patrolled more often, and whispers of strange lights in the forest spread quickly. Some people believed the lights were a warning. Others said they were nothing to fear. Darren and Myra returned to the city cautiously, carrying small stones with the carvings they had collected. They tried to show the elders the symbols, but most adults dismissed them. "These are old legends," one elder said. "The ancestors are gone. Focus on the city, not on stories in the forest." Darren felt frustration rise in him. He had seen the carvings, heard the whispers, and felt the presence of something greater in the wild. He could not let fear blind the city. Myra stood beside him, quietly nodding in agreement. That evening, a sudden tremor shook the city. People screamed as buildings rattled and dust fell from the walls. The energy shields flickered, and a loud crash echoed from the main gate. Soldiers ran toward the source, weapons raised. At the city wall, a massive creature had broken through. Its body was covered in thick scales, and glowing eyes scanned the streets. Smaller beasts surrounded it, moving in coordinated patterns. The city had never faced anything like this. Panic spread quickly as people ran for safety. Darren and Myra pushed through the crowd. "We need to help," Darren shouted. They ran toward the wall, stones in hand, hoping the carvings might guide them. Soldiers fought bravely, but the creatures were strong and intelligent. The beasts seemed to know the weaknesses of the walls, striking where energy shields were weaker. Darren realized that the carvings they had found might explain these weaknesses. He pulled Myra aside. "The ancestors left clues. We need to find them before more damage is done." Myra nodded, her eyes wide. "Then we must go back to the forest. Now." As the battle raged, Darren and Myra slipped past the chaos and returned to the wildlands. The forest seemed different this time. Shadows moved with purpose, and the glowing plants lit a path as if guiding them. They reached a small cluster of carvings near a river. Darren studied the stones carefully. "These carvings show the ancestors fighting the beasts. They also show patterns of energy. I think they knew how to control or redirect the power of the wild." Myra traced her fingers over the symbols. "Do you think we can do the same?" Darren nodded. "We have to try. The city depends on it." As they worked, the ground shook again. A smaller group of creatures approached, drawn by the tremors in the city. Darren realized the carvings were not just instructions, they were warnings. They told the story of balance between humanoids and the wild. The ancestors had tried to protect both. Suddenly, one of the carvings glowed brighter than the others. A soft hum filled the air. Darren felt energy surge through him as he touched the stone. The symbol seemed to come alive, showing him paths through the forest and ways to redirect energy from the plants and stones. Myra gasped. It's working. The carvings are helping you. Darren focused on the energy. He guided it toward the creatures that were approaching. The smaller beasts hesitated, then retreated into the shadows. Darren and Myra realized that the ancestors' power was still alive in the world, waiting for those who could understand it. They returned to the city just as the sun began to rise. The creatures were pushed back, but the city had suffered damage. The elders and leaders gathered, shocked by the evidence Darren and Myra brought. The carvings are real, Darren said firmly. The ancestors left knowledge to protect us. We cannot ignore the wild. We must learn from it, not fight it blindly. Some leaders were skeptical, but others saw the truth in Darren's words. The city had faced a threat it could not handle alone. The wildlands were not mindless, and the humanoid survival depended on understanding and adapting. That night, as the city repaired the damage, Darren and Myra sat on the wall, looking out at the forest. The wild seemed calmer, but both knew it was only waiting. The ancestors had left messages, and the humanoids had begun to listen. Darren turned to Myra. This is just the beginning. The wild is rising, and we must be ready. The ancestors gave us the knowledge. Now, we have to use it wisely. Myra nodded, feeling a mixture of fear and hope. I am ready. Whatever comes next, we face it together. The forest whispered around them, soft and alive. Somewhere deep within, the glow of the tears of the ancestors shone brighter than ever. A new chapter was beginning, one that would test the courage, intelligence, and heart of every humanoid in Oriones. Darren and Myra left the city early the next morning. The sun rose over Oriones, casting long shadows across the wildlands. The city behind them seemed smaller than before, its walls now a fragile barrier against the forest that waited silently. The two friends moved carefully, following the carvings they had discovered. Each step into the wild felt heavier, as if the forest itself was testing their courage. The air grew cooler as they entered a dense part of the forest, where ancient trees rose like giants. Moss hung from their branches, and strange flowers glowed faintly. Darren traced the carvings on the stones along the path. The ancestors wanted to guide us, he said. These ruins must hold more answers. Myra's eyes scanned the forest nervously. Do you think the creatures will find us here? She asked. They are part of the wild, Darren said. Not everything in the forest is against us. We need to move carefully and watch for signs. The carvings will guide us if we pay attention. After hours of walking, they reached a clearing. The ruins of a massive stone building stood before them, half buried under roots and vines. Pillars lay broken on the ground, and walls were covered with carvings that glowed faintly in the dim light. The air hummed with energy, as if the ancestors' presence lingered here. Darren and Myra stepped inside. The ruins were quiet, but every stone seemed alive with history. They discovered a central chamber where the walls were covered with carvings of humanoids and wild creatures. The scenes showed battles between the ancestors and giant beasts. Some carvings showed humanoids being victorious, but many showed failure. The tears of the ancestors appeared again, carved into the ground and walls. They fought the wild, Myra whispered. And they failed. Yes, Darren said. But look here. He pointed to a series of carvings along the far wall. They showed humanoids working with the creatures, guiding them instead of fighting. The ancestors learned that fighting alone does not bring victory. Balance is important. We cannot ignore the wild. We must understand it. Myra ran her fingers over the carvings. Do you think we can do the same? Darren nodded. I believe we can. We have to. The city depends on it. Suddenly, the ground trembled slightly. A low growl echoed from the ruins' entrance. The creatures from the wild had followed the energy from the carvings. Darren and Myra froze. But instead of attacking, the creatures circled the ruins cautiously. Darren noticed their behavior had changed. They were not purely aggressive. They seemed to be watching, learning, and testing. The carvings, they might be communicating with the creatures, Darren said. The ancestors used the tears to guide the wild, not just to protect themselves. We can try the same. Darren stepped forward, touching one of the glowing carvings. A pulse of energy spread through the chamber, and the creatures outside hesitated. Their growls softened, and some stepped closer, sniffing the air. Myra joined Darren, placing her hand on another carving. Together, they focused on the energy, guiding it gently toward the creatures. Slowly, the wild one stepped back, then disappeared quietly into the forest. That worked, Myra said, her voice filled with awe. The ancestors really knew what they were doing. Darren looked around the ruins. The carvings are lessons. They show us not only what happened in the past but also how to survive now. The wild is not our enemy, but it is strong. We have to respect it. Myra nodded. And if we fail, the city could be lost. Yes, Darren said. That is why we must learn everything we can from these ruins. We need to bring this knowledge back and prepare the people. The ancestors left us guidance, and now it is our turn to act wisely. They spent the rest of the day exploring the ruins. They discovered chambers filled with glowing crystals and small pools of water that reflected the carvings above. Each room seemed to tell a story of the ancestors' victories and failures, teaching lessons about courage, wisdom, and respect for the wild. As night fell, Darren and Myra set up camp inside the ruins. Outside, the forest seemed calm, yet alive. The creatures had retreated, but their presence lingered. The two friends knew that their journey was only beginning. The ruins had given them knowledge, but the real challenge was still ahead. Darren stared at the glowing carvings, feeling a sense of responsibility. We cannot fail, he said. The city, the wild, and the future of our people depend on what we do next. Myra nodded quietly. Then we learn, and we prepare. Whatever comes, we face it together. The night settled over the ruins, and the glow of the tears of the ancestors filled the chamber with a soft light. In that moment, Darren and Myra understood the weight of their mission. They were no longer just children exploring a dangerous forest. They were the beginning of a new path, one that could change the fate of all humanoids on Orion. Back in the city of Oriones, the calm did not last long. The tremors in the forest had grown stronger, and the creatures had become bolder. Small groups of beasts moved closer to the walls, testing the defenses. People were frightened. The soldiers tried to push them back, but the creatures were smart and coordinated, striking in patterns that seemed planned. The city leaders held an urgent meeting. We cannot hold them much longer, said one commander. The walls are failing in multiple areas. We may need to abandon the city. Another elder shook his head. We cannot run. If we leave, the city will be lost forever. We must fight. Darren and Myra arrived at the city gates, bringing the stones and carvings they had discovered in the ruins. The ancestors left us knowledge, Darren said. These carvings show us how to survive and guide the wild. We must learn from them, not ignore them. Some leaders looked skeptical. Children cannot tell us how to protect the city, one elder said. But we have evidence, Myra said. The carvings can help us control the energy of the wild, like they did long ago. We cannot ignore this. Before anyone could respond, a massive roar echoed through the streets. A giant creature, larger than any seen before, smashed through one of the walls. Smaller beasts followed, swarming the city like waves of living shadows. The battle had begun. Darren grabbed Myra's hand. We need to act. Now. They ran toward the largest carvings they had brought, placing them in strategic spots near the gates and walls. As they touched the stones, a soft glow spread from each carving. The energy pulsed in the air, reaching the creatures. Some stopped mid-step, confused. Others hesitated, sniffing the air. The carvings seemed to communicate with the wild, creating a temporary calm. Soldiers looked on in amazement. "What is happening?" one shouted. "The carvings," Darren said. "The ancestors used them to guide the wild. We can do the same." Myra focused her energy on the carvings as well. Together, she and Darren amplified the glow. The creatures outside the walls responded, some retreating while others turned back toward the forest. The tide of the attack slowed, giving the city a chance to regroup. Despite the temporary calm, the city had suffered. Walls were cracked, buildings damaged, and many people were hurt. Leaders realized that relying on brute force alone was not enough. They needed to understand the wildlands and the wisdom of the ancestors. Darren turned to the commanders. "We cannot keep fighting blindly. The carvings can guide the wild, but we must learn how to use them. The forest is alive. The creatures are part of it. We must respect that, or the city will be lost." Some soldiers nodded, while others still looked unsure. The city was divided, but the evidence of survival was clear. The carvings had worked, and they could work again if used wisely. That evening, Darren and Myra returned to the forest. They needed more carvings and more knowledge to strengthen the city's defenses. The wildlands seemed calmer, but the soft whispers of the forest reminded them that the creatures were still watching. The ancestors' presence lingered in the ruins, waiting for those who could understand their lessons. As they studied more carvings in a hidden chamber, they discovered new instructions. Some showed patterns of energy that could protect entire districts. Others revealed how to guide the creatures without harming them. Darren realized that the ancestors had not only fought the wild but had learned to live with it, creating balance instead of destruction. Myra looked around the chamber, her eyes wide with awe. The ancestors were clever. They knew that strength alone does not win. Understanding wins. "Yes," Darren said. "We must teach the city the same lesson. If we fail, the wild will rise again and stronger than before." Night fell, and the forest outside seemed alive with energy. Darren and Myra camped near the ruins, feeling both hope and worry. They had gained knowledge and temporary control, but the battle for the city was far from over. The wild had struck back, and it would strike again. The humanoids could survive, but only if they learned to adapt and respect the forces around them. Darren looked toward the distant city walls, glowing faintly under the moonlight. "Tomorrow, we begin teaching the people. They must understand that fighting blindly will not save them. The ancestors left a path, and we must follow it." Myra nodded. "We have come far, but the journey is just beginning. The wild is powerful, and we must be ready for whatever comes next." The forest whispered around them, alive and patient. The tears of the ancestors glowed softly in the ruins, waiting to guide the next steps of those brave enough to listen. Darren and Myra returned to the ruins before sunrise. The city of Oriones had survived the recent attack, but the damage was still visible. Cracked walls and broken buildings reminded them that their victory had been only temporary. The wild was rising, stronger than ever, and they knew that relying on soldiers alone would not protect the city. The ruins glowed faintly in the morning light. Darren approached the central chamber where the largest carvings were located. His heart beat quickly. He had a feeling that today, he would understand the full purpose of the tears of the ancestors. Myra followed closely, her eyes scanning every stone. "Do you think the carvings can give us more power?" she asked. Darren nodded. "I do not know exactly. But the ancestors left these tears for a reason. If we can awaken their energy, maybe we can guide the wild and protect the city." They entered the chamber. At the center was a stone pedestal, shaped like two open hands holding glowing crystal tears. The glow was soft at first, but it pulsed with energy as they approached. Darren felt warmth in his chest, as if the energy of the planet itself was reaching him. Myra gasped. They are beautiful. Do you feel that? Darren reached out and touched one of the crystals. A surge of light flowed through his body. Images flashed in his mind, the ancestors fighting the wild, guiding the creatures, and using energy to maintain balance. He saw mistakes and triumphs, pride and humility. The tears were not just symbols, they were tools of wisdom and power. Myra placed her hand on another crystal. Energy flowed into her as well. Together, they felt a connection to the forest, to the city, and to the ancestors who had lived long ago. The carvings on the walls glowed brightly, illuminating the chamber. The ancestors wanted us to see this, Darren whispered. They trusted the next generation to use their knowledge wisely. This is our chance to protect the city and learn from their mistakes. Outside, the forest stirred. The creatures sensed the energy and moved closer. But this time, Darren and Myra felt no fear. They focused on the energy of the tears, guiding it outward. The glow spread beyond the ruins, touching the edges of the forest. The creatures paused, then began to move in response to the energy, not attacking, but circling as if listening. Myra smiled. It is working. The tears are speaking to the wild. Darren nodded, concentrating. We can do more. We can calm the storm and guide the creatures. The ancestors showed us the way. We must use it wisely. They spent hours focusing on the energy, sending pulses through the forest, learning how to balance strength and calm. Slowly, the chaotic growls and roars faded. The creatures moved in patterns that reflected the carving's lessons: respect, balance, and careful guidance. Darren and Myra realized the full importance of their task. The tears of the ancestors were not just protection, they were a way to communicate with the wild, to maintain harmony between humanoids and the creatures of the forest. The energy was alive, waiting for those who could understand it. As the sun began to rise high in the sky, the two friends knew they had unlocked the first stage of the ancestors' power. They could now return to the city with a plan to defend it without destroying the forest or its creatures. Soldiers and leaders would need guidance, but with the tears, the humanoids had a real chance to survive and thrive. Darren looked at Myra. We cannot stop here. The city is still in danger. The wild will rise again. But now, we have the knowledge and the power to protect it. Myra nodded firmly. Then we act. Together, we will show the city how to use the ancestors' lessons. We cannot fail. The forest whispered around them, alive with energy. The creatures, once chaotic and wild, now moved in patterns that reflected the balance the ancestors had once maintained. Darren and Myra felt a deep connection to the world around them. They were no longer just children exploring ruins, they were the new guardians of Oriones, carrying the wisdom of the past to save the future. As night fell, the glow of the tears of the ancestors bathed the chamber in soft light. Darren and Myra prepared to return to the city, knowing that the final challenge was approaching. The wild would strike again, stronger and smarter, but this time, the humanoids had a chance to meet it with courage, wisdom, and unity. For the first time, they felt that the battle for the city was not hopeless. The ancestors' guidance was alive, and the humanoids were ready to rise. The city of Oriones woke to a restless dawn. The energy walls glimmered faintly, but the creatures from the forest were already moving closer. The attacks had grown stronger with each passing day, and the city knew that today could be the turning point. Darren and Myra stood at the city gates, holding the tears of the ancestors. The stones glowed with a soft, steady light. Soldiers and citizens gathered around, nervous but curious. Darren raised his hand. We have the knowledge and the power of the ancestors. Today, we face the wild not as enemies, but as guardians of our city and our world. The creatures emerged from the forest in great numbers. Some were massive and terrifying, while others were smaller but quick and clever. They moved as if guided by an unseen force, their eyes glowing in the early sunlight. The city held its breath. Darren touched one of the glowing tears. Energy pulsed through his body and spread outward. Myra followed, amplifying the glow. The creatures paused. They sniffed the air, hesitated, then began moving differently. They no longer charged blindly, instead, they responded to the energy, circling and observing rather than attacking. "This is the ancestors' power," Darren said. "We can guide them without hurting them." Soldiers looked amazed. "They are listening," one whispered. "We can control the wild with the carvings." "Yes," Darren said. "But we must focus and respect them. The wild is alive. If we anger it, it will strike harder than ever." Myra concentrated on the energy, sending pulses to the creatures. Slowly, the largest ones began to retreat from the walls, guided by the light and energy of the tears. Smaller creatures followed, creating a calm path through the forest toward the city gates. The chaos of the previous attacks began to fade. Darren and Myra realized that the city's survival depended not on walls or weapons alone, but on understanding the balance between humanoids and the wild. The tears of the ancestors were teaching them this lesson in real time. The citizens of Oriones watched in awe as Darren and Myra guided the creatures. They saw the energy of the stones reach out like threads of light, connecting with the wild, calming it, and guiding it away from destruction. It was a sight the city would never forget. Darren looked at Myra. "We can show the people how to protect the city and live with the wild, not fight it. This is what the ancestors wanted." Myra nodded. "We have the chance to change the future. We cannot waste it." Together, they moved along the walls, sending energy from the tears of the ancestors to every part of the city. Soldiers and citizens began to follow their lead, using smaller carvings and crystals to guide the wild further. The creatures responded to the patterns, retreating into the forest without harming the city or its people. As the sun rose higher, the forest grew quiet. The creatures had returned to their territory, but now they moved in harmony with the humans. The city was safe, and the walls stood unbroken. Darren and Myra lowered their hands, breathing heavily but filled with relief. The city leaders approached them, awe in their eyes. "You have done what we could not," one said. "The ancestors' power and your courage saved us all." Darren smiled. "The ancestors left us guidance. We just had to listen and learn. The wild is not our enemy. It is part of our world, and we must respect it." Myra added, "We fought not with weapons, but with understanding. That is the true strength of humanoids." The citizens cheered. For the first time, they saw that survival was not just about defending walls or fighting beasts. It was about courage, wisdom, and unity. The energy of the ancestors had shown them a new path, and they had followed it together. As night fell, Darren and Myra walked along the edge of the forest. The creatures moved peacefully among the trees. The city behind them glowed softly in the moonlight. The forest was alive, but calm. The tears of the ancestors had restored balance. Darren looked at Myra. "We have learned the lesson of the ancestors. We must teach it to everyone so that the city and the wild can live together." Myra smiled. "We faced fear, danger, and the unknown. But we succeeded. The future of Oriones is bright, and humanoids have proven they can rise above any challenge." The two friends stood silently, watching the forest and city together. The wild and the humanoids had survived, not by fighting each other, but by understanding, respecting, and guiding. The tears of the ancestors glowed softly, a reminder that knowledge, courage, and wisdom were the true powers of their world. In that moment, the people of Oriones knew they were ready for anything. The wild could rise again, storms could come, but the humanoids had learned the ancestors' lessons. They were strong, clever, and united. They were capable of shaping their own destiny. And for the first time, Darren and Myra felt that the future of their world was truly in their hands.